All right, guys, so in this video, I'm going to do a deep dive in identity reconstruction. This is one of my favorite topics. Why? Well, because if you master this one skill, which is reconstructing your identity, you can achieve every goal that you have. Why? Because goal achieving is not about you doing something, it's about you becoming someone. Now, most people believe, what do most people believe in? Most people believe that what you do today is going to shape who you become in the future. That's actually backwards. It's who you see yourself becoming in the future that is shaping who you are today. So your actions that you make on a daily basis are being derived from a future version that you see of yourself. Let me prove that to you. Let's just say for a quick second here, hypothetically speaking, you're somebody who's going into men's bodybuilding. So you're competing in bodybuilding. If that was the case and you knew that you had a competition maybe a month out, would you have made different decisions in terms of the food that you consume today? The answer is, of course you would have changed the way that you're dieting. Why? Because all you're thinking about is you're seeing yourself on stage and all the judges rating and assessing your physique. So what you see yourself becoming in the future dictates your actions today. It is not what you do today that determines who you become in the future. Now, that being said, if that is the case, then the question becomes, well, how do I know what future do I see for myself? That is what identity is. See, identity is this fluid concept that a lot of people find a little hard to understand and grasp because it is not something that we visibly see and touch. It is something that is related to our subconscious. And what is our subconscious? We have our conscious mind and we have our subconscious mind. And our subconscious is not the mind that we daily think of. It is the subconscious that is underneath it. And that subconscious mind rules every single decision that you make. It is a scary topic for some people, for them to know that their life is just a printout of a mental program. If my life was a printout of a mental program, then the question that I have for myself and the question that you're probably asking of yourself is, well, who programmed me? Wait, you're telling me that my life right now is basically a printout of a program? What program is that? That program is your subconscious mind. Now, we learn from psychologists that our subconscious is programmed in the first 7 to 8 years of our life. And then once that is done, our subconscious stays the same. So if that's the case, the question becomes, well, who programmed me? Because whoever programmed me is dictating my decisions and my choices today. Well, it doesn't matter who programmed you. The answer is it wasn't you. It could have been your parents. It could have been your environment. It could have been your community. Chances are, whatever results that you have in your life right now, if anything comes hard to you, it's because in your first 7 to 8 years of life, subconsciously, your programming does not allow for that result to exist. Let me give you an example. Let's just say you're constantly overweight. Every time you try to get fit, you find yourself becoming overweight and you just carry some extra fat in your physique. I promise you, this is coming somewhere subconsciously in your programming. Perhaps you come from a family that is obese. Perhaps you come from a family, or perhaps in your upbringing, you learned that eating food and consuming food is a way to cope with stress. Maybe commitment is hard for you. Why is commitment hard for you? Because you didn't grow up in a household where your parents had a good relationship. Maybe you don't like marriage, or you fear committing to someone, or your views on marriage are flawed. Why? Because you grew up with your dad or your mom, maybe your dad saying that marriage is just a necessary evil. And so all of those things are deposited in our subconscious. Why? Because our subconscious is not materialized. See, our brain has different components. We have the analytical brain, and then we have the subconscious brain. And up to the age of 7 to 8, our analytical brain is not developed yet. So your kids, us, when we were, children, we don't absorb information by knowledge because we don't have the analytical brain developed yet. Our brain is not fully developed, and so we don't really analyze information. But what we do is we save information from our environment. And so whatever we've seen when we were growing up in our upbringing is what determines our subconscious, and that deposit, that programming ends up ruling our entire life. And so if that's the case, and I know that my life is just a printout of a program, the question now becomes is how do I get those results? Because the issue is that I go out, I open up Instagram, I open up TikTok, I watch YouTube, and I see all these people living a great life, and they have all these lives, and I say, you know what, well, I too want to become rich. I too want to create wealth. wealth. I too want to become a millionaire. Well, you know what? That Lamborghini, I'd like to get myself a Lamborghini as well. And you think about building a business, and you think about leading others, and then you think about living in multiple, countries and around the world, and you begin to have all those dreams. But it doesn't matter if you have all those dreams if your programming is not actually what? Is not there to serve and to allow for that goal to happen. So the example I could give you is this. Think about, what if somebody were to, say for example, you have an essay. You have an essay, it's on your computer, and in that essay there's a little bit of a typo. There's a typo there. So every time you print a document, you see that there's a word there that is misspelled. So what do? You take out a pen and you fix it with your pen, and then the next time that you go and you print that document, what happens? You see the exact same typo again. Well, why? Because you fixed the paper, you didn't fix the file. This is what most people do wrong, is that they try to fix their goals by injecting more willpower, but every time they print out a new day, the same misspelling, the same error appears because they didn't fix it in their source file, which is their identity. So every single day that comes is like a new printout of that same essay with the misspelling. You have to fix the source file in order for you to actually see change happening in your life. So how do we do that? Well, the answer is you have to reconstruct your identity. You have to reconstruct your subconscious. So what is the process? What is the step-by-step process for me to actually build the identity that is capable of accomplishing that goal? Well, the answer is very simple. Think of that goal, whatever goal that you desire. Maybe it's 8% body fat. Maybe it's a six-pack. Maybe it's making a 7-figure income, right, a year. Maybe it's having a family. Maybe it's whatever that goal may be, whatever your goal is. Ask yourself this. Don't ask yourself, what should I do to get that goal? But the person who's already attained that goal, that version, that identity, what does that person look like? How do they behave? How do they carry themselves? How do they process issues? How is their relationship with stress? Begin to identify the identity of the person who makes that goal easy. You might think that attaining a six-pack, that attaining a 7-figure income, that making $100,000 a month is something that is what? That is way up there. You think it's hard. Maybe you think making $1 million a month is something that is way up there, that it's not even impossible. It's not even within my grasp. But that's the version of you today, because the person who's already at that level, are there people that are operating at that level? Of course there are. There are too many people. If you were to ask them, hey, is it hard? You know what they're going to say? It's not hard. So the person who has already accomplished that goal, they don't view that goal as being hard and tedious and stressful. They don't have all these negative emotions associated with that goal, and therefore they attract that goal, they become it, right? So you don't have that because your emotions and what you associate with that is negative. So what you need to do is you need to ask yourself, what is the identity of the person who has already attained and accomplished that goal? How do they behave? Now, once you identify what that identity is, the next step is for you to behave as if you were that person every single day. How do you do that? Well, you need to have a routine, my friend. You need to have a routine that allows for that identity and that version to exist. And it has to be every single day. It can't be every other day. It cannot be once a week. It cannot be once a month. It has to be a routine that is built to optimize for that version of yourself to appear, whereby you're reinforcing that identity every single day. Let me give you an example. This is literally what I've done for me to go from homeless to millionaire. Now, there were a lot of things that happened within the span of 4 years where I went homeless and I needed to acquire the skill set, I need to learn the strategy, but there was a point in my life where I looked at myself and I said, hey, you know what? What the hell is wrong? I feel stuck in my life. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, I know that I work hard, I know that I'm talented, I know that I'm skilled, I know that I'm putting in the effort, but for whatever reason, I'm just not getting the result. I'm just not getting the result that I'm doing, and I'm working hard, and it's very frustrating. If you've ever felt this way, you're not alone. I felt this way as well. And so then one time I saw a YouTube video where somebody said, I think it was Bruce Lipton, right? Where he said, your life is a printout of the program. And I said, what program? Your subconscious program. So whatever you desire, whatever you aim to achieve, if it's not in the program, you're not going to get it. And then I looked at that and I said, well, you know what, then if that's the case, then I'm screwed. You know why? Because nobody in my family succeed in business. My family comes from a 9-to-5 corporate mentality. They've succeeded in a corporate type of a structure. So when it comes to corporate America, I come from a family where all my dad, my grandfather, my aunts, and my uncles, all they know is to work for somebody else. And it's a high paid position. Maybe they're higher management, but at the end of the day, they're still employees. They're not independently wealthy. And so because that's the environment that I was in, and that's the environment that I grew up in, which was what? Go to school, succeed, make sure that you get good grades, and then get a good, go to a good university, get a good college degree. Why? Because you want that employee to finally give you a job, right? That was the golden handcuffs. That was the recipe for success that was taught to me at a very young age. I heard that from my dad. I heard that from my mom. I heard that from my grandfather. I kept hearing that all throughout high school, all throughout my childhood. That's what they preached, that education and school was the path for success. Now, what does this guy do? I quit my job. I go there. I get hired by a $2 trillion company, the oil giant of the world, and then by the time that I graduate college, I quit. Why? Because I had an ambition. I wanted to become a business owner. I had this dream of becoming a millionaire, maybe even a billionaire. I just wanted to see how far I could go. The issue is that I wasn't programmed for that. I was programmed through school. I went to Boston University. I was programmed to work for somebody else. Now, when I started my own business, I quit the job, I went broke, and then when I started operating the business, guess what I realized? I realized that I wasn't the person that I needed to become for me to turn that business into a success. So guess what happened? I went bankrupt. In a matter of a year, I went from sleeping in a luxury apartment in Cambridge, Massachusetts, to sleeping in a room that I got off of Craigslist in Salem, Massachusetts. It was a one-bedroom inside an old lady's house. And then when my business closed, after it failed, I only had my Toyota Prius for me to crash at the end of the night, and that's when I got into sales. Now, when I got into sales, you know what I did? I found a mentor, and I spent the next 4 years shadowing a mentor, a cash flow millionaire, to teach me the skill set of entrepreneurship. Why? Because I needed to reconstruct what my identity was. Now, as I was reconstructing my identity, I had a routine, and I still have a routine, because I am not the version who I want to be today. Even though I've attained a level of success, I am still at the tip of the iceberg. There's still a lot more for me to accomplish. So I use this in my life every single day. I am constantly recreating who I am. Matter of fact, every 6 months, when I meet my team, when I see my guys, I don't want people to even recognize me. I want them to tell me, you've changed. When somebody tells me, you've changed, I don't recognize you, that is the biggest compliment that any person could ever give me. So what do I do every single day? The first thing I do, you could copy my routine. It worked for me. Chances are it would work for you. I would wake up and I do my fasted cardio. To me, when I do my fasted cardio, this is not me just burning calories. This is me tapping to a version. This is like me connecting to a Wi-Fi. If you have your phone and you want to access what? If you want to access the internet, you want to access chat, if you want to access Claude, if you want to access YouTube or Instagram, you want to get some information, right? You connect to Wi-Fi, you connect to data, you connect to the internet. To me, when I jump on that treadmill, that's me connecting to a higher version of myself. And what do? I start watching videos, not of the past. The same way that you watch videos of the past, how many times have you watched videos of your future? Again, not the past. We all watched videos in the past. How many times have you watched a video of your future? You know what I do? When I jump on that treadmill, I have a playlist and I visualize where my life is heading. I visualize where I am personally going. I look at my future house. I look at my future cars. I look at my future family. I look at my future jet. I look at every single thing. And you know what I do? I don't just visualize it. Now I start to associate all those emotions with that feeling. When I look at that, the exact same way that you take a look at, have you ever looked at a video in the past and you started crying? You start tearing up because it rushes all those memories, right? If you could do that with your future and you're emotionally associating with the vision that you set for yourself, and now you start to feel it in your body, not just think about it, but feel it. Because again, thinking is the electrical energy, right? It's electromagnetic waves. That's the law of attraction, right? Thinking is the thinking is the electrical energy. Feeling is the magnetic energy. So if you're just thinking about it, you're not going to attract it. You have to think it and you also have to feel it. If you could combine both, and when you're there and you watch that and you start to what? To get emotional because you change your feeling. Now you're living in that moment. Before it happens, you're living in them. We've all experienced this. Men, do you want me to prove that to you? I could easily prove that to you. You know what it's called? It's called an erection. Ever had an erection before, bro? Of course you have. what were you thinking in that moment? You were living a moment in your head that caused a physical change in your body, right? The same way that mechanism happened with a thought, you could do the exact same thing with your goals. I just gave you the biggest hack. I hope that you practice that. So when I'm on that cardio, when I'm doing fasted cardio, and I'm looking at my future, I'm visualizing it, now I'm feeling it. Now at that point in time, guess what I'm feeling? I just downloaded a new version of myself. I don't step out of that treadmill the same person who walked in. When I woke up in the morning, I wasn't that person. I woke up with a lot of negativity. So when I hit the gym, I'm not hitting the gym for me to acquire. I'm not hitting the gym for me to get muscles. I'm hitting the gym for me to get rid of all the negative stuff that I woke up with, and I clear my system, I clear my thoughts, I clear my brain, and I hold that vision steadfast. And then the challenge is for you to stay on that emotion, to stay on that wavelength for the rest of the day. Because what's going to happen? Life is going to happen. Life is designed to test you and have you veer off the vision. Because guess what's going to happen? Your team's going to quit on you. Your employees might call you one day and say, hey, you know what? I found another opportunity. Your agents might quit on you. Something is going to happen where if you're in sales and your clients are going to cancel on you. Some people are not going to show up on their appointments. Life is going to happen. Your family might give you some tough time. Your wife might give you something, So life is going to constantly test your will. If you could remain steadfast on that vision and continue to have those emotions regardless, and remain unfazed regardless of what happens, regardless of how bad life gets, you're holding on to that and you're making every single choice throughout the day, not as the broke version of yourself, not as the present version of yourself right now, but as that future version of yourself, and you make your choices as if you were them. Guess what's going to happen? You're not going to act like them. Soon enough, you're going to become them. And that is what Mike Tyson, the great Mike Tyson, we can learn that from none other than Mike Tyson. He says what? He says you have to be him before you become him. One of the most beautiful quotes I have for Mike is you have to be him before you become him. Talk about somebody who took himself from a criminal in New York to becoming a world-class icon that we still talk about today as someone who's still relevant to this day. How was he able to do that? You know what? You know how? He had somebody in his life, a coach and a mentor by the name of Customato, who reconstructed his entire identity. He literally hypnotized Mike. He hypnotized Mike before his fights. And if you take a look at some of the footage post fights with Mike Tyson, like when he was there was this clip. There was this famous clip that when I looked at that clip repeatedly, I looked at that and I told myself, the moment I looked at it, my jaw dropped and I said, wow, how many times did Mike say that? Because there was this post-fight interview where Mike is asked something and then he starts spitting out some words. You could see at the start of the interview, he was struggling to barely put 3 words together. He just wasn't making any sense. Lennox Lewis, right? He was just did not make any sense. And then all of a sudden, it's like this new person just was summoned. And he said his famous words. I don't recall what they are right now, but he said his famous words. I'm Alexander. He's no Alexander. That clip, right? So go watch that. When you watch that, I want you to see the shift, the transformation. That was a new identity at that point in time that was just triggered and brought into the present moment. That's the killer Mike. That's that guy who was an annihilator. You think that was the first time that he mentioned it? No way. That was his affirmation for years. And that came out at that moment, and the world saw that at that moment. So that is what I mean by identity reconstruction. Your job is for you to hold those emotions regardless of all the bullshit that life throws at you. Because if you do that, you're not going to act like that person, you're going to become that person. And once you understand that, then you're not going to chase any goals anymore. You're not going to go after goals anymore. You're going to become them. And life then becomes something that you could just create. You go from a victim to a hustler to an operator to a what? To a king, to a creator. And if you want to learn more about the different archetypes of identity, watch my next video. If this added some value to you, then make sure that you subscribe, that you comment, and share this with someone that needs to hear this message. That being said, until next time.